Trance around the world with Above and Beyond on Ministry of Sound Radio.
Welcome to another Trance Around the World then with us, Above and Beyond. We've got a great show for you tonight with records from Quivver, Mike Koglin, a guest mix live from Miika Kuisma from the weekend. This is Paris and Healy with Blue. Well, that was a bit of a mashup there. Paris and Healy Blue, first of all there, and this is Redanka with Waves. Hi to Rezo in Norway, and Saho's chatting in the Above and Beyond Kingdom on MSN apparently. Sounds interesting. You can have your shouts read out by emailing us at studio@ministryofsound. Well, that last record's going to be a really big one for us. Don't forget you can find the full track listing as ever on aboveandbeyond.nu. Hi to Thomas from Deventer in the Netherlands. Hope I pronounced that right. It's Tom's 19th birthday as well, so happy birthday, Tom. And thanks for voting for us in the DJ Mag poll. It's very kind of you. Lots of people emailing in with the answer to last week's question, but it's now a week on, so I'm afraid the competition has ended. I hope those of you who went to Euphoria had a great time there. Meanwhile, we were having a great time in Wildchild, so thanks to everyone who came to see us there.
Also a big thanks to all of you who came to Decibel Outdoors 2004, the first ever party where I could say the trance room ended up being the chill out room because all the other 7 massive tents were playing hard techno.
It was a bit banging, I hear.
Oh yeah, but a great party. So thanks.
Well, if you like it deep and dirty and proggy, that should suit you. That's Antidote with Velocity on Bonsai Progressive. I've had an email in here from Tony from Sydney. He says, unfortunately, he can't make it to our gig at the ARQ Club on Friday in Sydney because he's too young. He's only 17. Can't you sort of arrange some fake ID? That's what we used to do when we were younger. Go on, try it. Coming up, the record of the week.
Just found
Record of the week.
Now this week's record of the week comes from Tilt, one of our favourite artists on Trance around the world. It's called 12. Parvo, you've got something to say about this one?
Oh yeah, I actually got my hands on this already about a month and a half ago from Ben at Lost Language. Thanks for that, Ben. Unfortunately, it's been so new that he hasn't allowed us to even tell anyone what it is.
We've had to keep quiet on this one. We've been playing it for a few weeks in the clubs, but this is its debut on the radio. It's Tilt with 12.
You're listening to Above and Beyond on Ministry of Sound Radio.
So that was our record of the week then. That was Tilt with 12 on Lost Language. Quite a long time before that was released though, I think. Hi to Kiri in Shrewsbury, wants to shout out Arkson, Dave Dowsett, Adam Turan, Ryan G and Ruben and anyone else who's listening. Arnold from France has emailed in to ask when the new Tranquility Bass single is out. I think it's out at the end of the month. You can check on our website, anjunabeats.com. Now, Armin from Berlin wants to come to the Anjuna Beats night in September, but unfortunately he's afraid of flying, so maybe he can take the boat over or something. I don't know what to do about that, really.
trance around the world with Above and Beyond.
We've had a lot of requests for this over the last couple of weeks. This is a new single from Super 8, it's called Create.
You're listening to Trance Around the World with Above and Beyond.
Hello to Liam, who tells us tonight you can take a horse to water, but a pencil must be lead.
What?
No. Hello to Sean in Cannock, who's asked a very interesting question, which is if we had to vote for somebody in the DJ Mag Top 100, who would it be? We'll have a think about that and get back to you on that. Jimmy Savile. Tony, who's asking for our mix of Holding On. Can't play that quite yet. Kyle is asking for Sander Van Doorn Dark Roast. I think we might slip that in later. And then Miika Russell, who asks, how can you play in Russia and New Zealand on the same day? That's because there are three of us. I'm playing the Moscow Gatecrasher, and Jono and Parvo are out in Sydney at ARC. And hi to Matty Hudson and all on the Anjona Beats forum. That's from Charlie Mack.
listening to Above and Beyond on Nuclear Sound Radio.
That was the new single from JFK and Mike Koglin, and it's called Relentless, and it absolutely was. I don't know if any of you know JFK, but it reminds me of that guy who does Jazz Club off the Faster Show.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Nice.
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to do is do some shouts. Fraser, you know who you are. You want Time Lord, not this week, mate. The TARDIS is not in town today. I want to say hello to a regular poster, Marl Schmidt. He wants to say hello to his friend Charlie in Argentina, who just left recently, as we all know. Regular listeners to this soap opera show will know that. Hello to Nathan and Katie, who are waiting for us to play at Passion in Colville. And when's that going to be, Mark? Can you remember?
To be honest, I don't know, but it might have something to do with last week and in Holland, but...
No, maybe. And hello to Pablo in Peru, who goes by the name of Denko Rub on our forum.
Sounds like a sexual name.
It sounds like it's some kind of cleaning apparatus, doesn't it? I don't know how they come up with these names. Any road, enjoy the show.
just on the right side of happy, isn't it?
Yeah. We're just talking about this record here, and it's truly a dark monster, I'd say. But it's a lovely.
I don't know about dark. I was just saying it's just on the right side of happy sort of thing. It's not quite too happy, but
it's got a very dark side to it. And also this week we have our first ever live gig here on Trance Around the World by a maestro of I would say slightly similar style of trance. And this week's live show will be from Miika Kuisma, who's a regular producer on John 00 Fleming's Juve label. And we met Miika in Holland at the Decibel Outdoor 2004 festival on Saturday. And we played a very, very interesting set, which we will hear in a minute.
Live from the studios of Ministry of Sound, we have Doogie Howser.
that is gorgeous. That's Rio, Addicts and Crossroads. Now, the web vote winner.
This week's web vote winner.
And from last week's very proggy show, a gorgeously proggy winner.
I'm glad people voted for it, actually.
I am too. We took a bit of a gamble playing it last week, but it's played
Did
off.
we?
Oh,
It's no gamble. It's no gamble at all, mate.
what is it?
What is it? It's Quivver and These Other Days.
listening to Trance Around the World with Above and Beyond.
Oh yeah, baby.
That is just gorgeous, isn't it?
Sex on a stick. Hello to John Sharrett, wherever you are, mate. Hello to Healy in Germany, our dear chum.
Healy, he's an absolute star, isn't he?
He's a lovely man. Adam, aka Pikaya, wants to say hello to everybody on trance.nu and the Anjuna Beats forum, so hello to all of you lot. Hello to Keith from North Carolina.
Hello.
And hello to everyone. This is Dido, Sand in My Shoes.
Above and Beyond 在 Ministry of Sound 广播电台。
I've still got sand in my shoes, and I can't shake the thought of you. I should get on, forget you, but why would I want to? I know we said goodbye, anything else would have been confused. before Above and Beyond's Essential Mix was broadcast, Pete Tong said,
A debut to a London-based production outfit who we reckon have all the trappings of major stars. They are Above and Beyond.
After the broadcast, it was so heavily requested, it has become the most popular Essential Mix of 2004. More recently, Judge Jules described them as
the future of UK trance, above and beyond.
Now's your chance to have your say. If you've enjoyed their Essential Mix, their Trance Around the World radio show, or their live DJ sets, vote for Above and Beyond in this year's DJ Magazine Top 100 poll. To place your vote, log on to djmag.com. Don't trance around your handbag, trance around the world with Above and Beyond.
You're listening to shameless self-promotion on Ministry of Sound Radio.
Well, if we can't do it here, where can we do it?
Exactly. I want to vote for me. Andy C says hi to all the sexually frustrated lads trying to hit on Cosmo on the Anjuna Beats forum.
There is a girl on the internet out there.
Well, yeah, who likes trance. That's the funniest shouts I think we've ever done. Hello to Kent from Colorado, to Matthew Anderson and to Willem Evers. We've got time for a few more, but this is Deepest Blue Shooting Star remixed by our very own, the very lovely Smith and Pleasure.
Really goes off this one, doesn't it?
You're listening to Above and Beyond on Ministry of Sound Radio.
You're just not there anymore.
That's really all we have time for this week. Thanks to everyone for listening. Those of you who sent in a shout and got it read out, thanks for that.
Don't forget you can catch us this weekend in Sydney and Auckland. Details on the website aboveandbeyond.nu.
And also in Moscow, if you're not planning on going to the Southern Hemisphere.